odd functions, graphically being able to look at an even odd function. There was one question that came around when I looked at the homework. I think Miles was looking at this particular one right here. Let me pick a different color. Make this function odd. So even means same, odd means opposite, okay? So to make this function odd, describe how I get to this point right here. I go where? How do I get from the origin to this point right here? I go right 4. What's the opposite of right 4 and up 4? Left 4 and down 4. So left 4 and down 4 is right here, okay? Now let's take this point. What is the direction to give me that point? Left 5 and up 3. So the opposite of that will be right 5 and down 3. Okay, right there. This point, what are the directions to get there? This point right here. What are the directions? Left 3, down 2. So the opposite of that will be right 3, up 2. Okay, which is right there. And then this last point right here is right 6, down 5. Right 6, down 5. So left 6, up 5 is right here. Okay, so that makes that an odd function. Okay, that one's a little bit tricky. It's easier to see things like this. Okay, the odd function here, to get to this point, left 1, up 4. So right 1, down 4 is right here. Okay, to get to this point was left 6, up 4. So right 6, down 4 is right here. And just connect those dots. Okay, and then this little line here, left 6 and down 3. Right 6 and up 3 is here. And I get that. Okay, so that makes that an odd function. Okay. So graphically, even and odd functions, you should be pretty good with that at this point. We could have done more on Monday, but because it was Music to Midtown Monday, we took it light. Okay. Now, this lesson is probably the toughest one that you'll have before the quiz in this particular unit. I hate to rate things, but if I had to remember what people struggle with, it's algebraically proving something is even or odd. So we need to remember, if something is even, okay, if it's even, I get the same number on either side of the y-axis. Okay, so what that means, a function will be even if f of x and f of negative x give me the same value. Okay, so if I look at f of x and f of negative x, if I get the same thing, that's an even function. A function will be odd if I look at f of x and f of negative x if I get the opposite value. So f of negative x gives me the same value of f of x. Here, f of negative x gives me the opposite value of f of x. That's what makes a function odd. So these are the two things I have to prove or disprove if I'm trying to prove a function is even or odd. Okay, so let's look at an example here. Let's prove that f of x equal x squared plus 2 is an even function. Okay, so what I need to do to prove this, I need to show that f of x equals f of negative x. That's what it means for a function to be even. Okay, so f of x in this case is x squared plus 2. Everyone agree with that? All I did was copy it down. So, and this is where people tend to make some algebraic mistakes. But let's go over here. What I need to find what f of negative x is. So what happens is this is substituting x into the function. What needs to get substituted in now? Over here. F of negative, I need to substitute negative x. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write f of x again. I'm just going to repeat myself. F of x is x squared plus 2. Okay? So I haven't done anything yet to change anything. Now here's what I'm going to do. You don't have to do this, but I do this because I'm trying to make it clear what's happening. Everywhere I see an x, I'm just going to leave it a blank parentheses. Okay? So if you were to plug x in, you would get x squared plus 2. So all I did, I replaced that x with a blank parentheses. Now, I'm going to leave that like it is, and I'm just going to copy this down one more time. Now, what needs to get substituted into this function? Negative x. So f of negative x is going to be this. F of negative x is going to be negative x squared plus 2. Okay? So all I'm doing, I'm just trying to go slow and take steps so you can see exactly what I'm doing here. Now, I just need to simplify what I have here. So this means that f of negative x is equal to, so negative x squared. What does it mean when I square a number? What do I do? Multiply it by itself. So this is negative x times negative x plus 2. Okay? What's negative x times negative x? Not x. Negative x times negative x, it's x squared. Okay, so you've got a negative number times a negative number will always be a positive number. So you've got, what you've got here, you've got a negative 1 and a negative 1 being multiplied, and you've got an x and an x. So this tells me that f of negative x is equal to x squared plus 2, because negative x times negative x equals x squared. So what I did there was when I had, so negative x times negative x, that's negative 1 times x times negative 1 times x. Negative 1 times negative 1 is 1. X times x is x squared. So negative x squared is the same as x squared. So now I can tell you that this is what kind of function? What happens when you compare these two values? What is it? What do I see though? F of x and f of negative x are what? They're equal to each other, okay? I've proven that f of x is x squared plus 2 and f of negative x is x squared plus 2. So don't miss, if you've done all this work, don't miss that the final answer is that this function is even because f of x equal f of negative x. So your answer on all these problems is going to be even, odd, or neither, and there's also going to be a reason why. So this function is even because I proved that f of x equals f of negative x. That's what an even function does. You get the same value when you have opposite values for that input variable x. Okay? Now how does that feel? Okay? What is it, Jagori? Complicated. Yes. Okay. So this is, so you're going to need to practice on this, and like I said, if I do this over and over, I think it should feel like a little rhythm as we get going. So let's do this the next one. I want to prove that f of x equal the absolute value of x is even. Okay. So I will give you a chart that looks like this. So f of x equal absolute value of x. All I did was copy down what I had there. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy that down again so that you see the steps of what is happening here. So my first step was so this is f of x, but what do I need to find? I need to find f of what? Negative. So I need to be substituting negative x in. The way I do this is I'm just going to replace all my x's with blank parentheses, okay? So that I'm very clear about what I'm doing, okay? You don't have to do this step, but we're going to do things later in the semester where if you're doing this, it is helpful. So I'm just writing, if I needed to find f of 2, what would I plug in? I would just plug in a 2 everywhere you see a blank parentheses, okay? So now I know that f of negative x is going to be equal to the absolute value of negative x, okay? So all I did was in those parentheses, I put in a negative x. Okay? So this tells me that f of negative x is equal to, this is the absolute value of negative x. This is where I got to work and see what does that mean to me. So what is negative x is what number times x? Negative x is what number times x? Negative 1. So this tells me that f of negative x is equal to the absolute value of negative 1 times x. Well, negative x is just negative 1 times x. Negative 2x would be negative 2 times x. Okay. Negative 3x would be negative 3 times x. Okay. Now, what is the absolute value of negative 1? 1. Okay. So f of negative x is equal to 1 times the absolute value of x. So that is simply what? F of negative x is equal to what? Absolute value of x. Okay, what was my original? Here's my original, that's f of x. This is f of negative x. What does that mean about this function? It is even, okay? So this function is even. That's part of my answer. Why is it even? It is even because f of x equal f of negative x, okay? Yes, you do. So to prove something is even, you have to prove f of x equal f of negative x. F of x you just copy down, you're given that. F of negative x, you have to substitute a negative x into the equation, and then you got to do some thought process and some algebraic simplification to see, can I get these things to look like they're even? So when I first substitute in the negative x, f of negative x equal the absolute value of negative x. I'm not sure at this point are these things equal until I reason through and say, oh, well, this is negative 1 times x. Absolute value of negative 1 is 1. I can show that these things are equal. So you have to do a little bit of algebraic work to get to the answer there. Okay, is that one feeling any better? Or on a scale of like, you know, this is fun or at the dentist, I mean, this is not dentist level stuff. I mean, this is, it's on the way to being there, isn't it? That's like my biggest fear in life is the dentist chair. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Where we prove something was what? Even. We also need to be able to prove when a function is odd. Okay? So, if a function is even, so here's what you got to remember. If a function is even, that means that f of x equals f of negative x. Okay? If a function is odd, we know that f of negative x, it's not going to equal f of x, it's going to equal the what of f of x? The opposite. The opposite of f of x is just going to be minus f of x. Okay? So f of negative x equal f of x, that's when it's even. F of negative x equal minus f of x, that's when the function is odd. So what you're going to see on your test, you're going to see things like here. Here's a table, f of x, f of minus x, and minus f of x. Okay? If these two columns match, what kind of function do I have? Even. If these two columns match, what kind of function do I have? Odd. So that's the way we're going to organize it. Okay? So f of x, what is f of x here? X cubed. Okay? That's the easy part. Okay? So I've got that. Now the next thing I need to find is f of negative x. So yeah, so I'm just going to have to work. So I'm just going to work through both of them. So f of x equal x cubed. I'm going to just, everywhere I see an x, I'm going to write a blank parentheses. That tells me this is what I need to do. Now, what needs to go in here? Negative x. So that's what I did. Okay. So I get f of negative x equal negative x cubed. Okay. What does it mean to cube something? Multiply it by itself how many times? 3 times. So f of negative x is equal to negative x times negative x times negative x. How many negatives are there? 3. So if you got 3 negatives, you're going to end up with a what? A negative. So this is going to be f of negative x equal negative, and then what's x times x times x? X cubed. Okay. So f of negative x is negative x cubed. Now, what is negative f of x? So if f of x is x cubed, how do I get negative f of x? What do I have to do? You stick a negative in front of f of x. Now, if I stick a negative in front of this side of the equation, what must I do on the other side? A negative. Okay, so negative f of x is negative x cubed. Okay, now, does f of x equal f of negative x? No, but does f of negative x equal negative f of x? Do these two things match? Yeah, this function is what? Odd. So this function is odd. And why is it odd? You just copy off of there. It's odd because this and this are equal. So f of negative x equal minus f of x. Okay? So what you will be given on the test, you'll be given a column that looks like this. Okay? And so you just need to know, if you can prove these two things are equal, you've got an even function. If you can prove these two things are equal, you have an odd function. If these things don't match at all, you have what? It's neither even nor odd. Okay? Yes. The only entities are f of x, f of negative x, and negative f of x. Okay? If these first two things match, that's the definition of an even function. If these two things match, that's the definition of an odd function. So you've got f of x. If f of negative x gives you the same thing, that's even. So that's when these two things match. If f of negative x gives you the opposite of f of x, then you've got an odd function. Okay. So in all of these cases, here I'm telling you to prove it's odd, but on the test I might say prove if it's even or odd or neither. Okay. So that's why I'm giving you these three columns here to help you in that explanation. So let's look at the next one then. Let's prove that 5x, f of x equal 5x is odd. So first step, just write down what f of x is. This part's pretty painless, 5x. You know, I don't know if I get points for that one. Yeah, I'm already helping you, okay? So this is just copy. This is like, yeah, this is just, it's saying, can you copy this down, okay? So let's pretend like you're going to college and you don't get credit for that one, okay? So f of x equal 5x, okay? You may not like this, but what I do, I always just write the next line, replace all my x's with blank parentheses. Because what I'm about to do, I'm about to substitute something else into this function. What am I going to substitute in? I'm going to substitute f of negative x is equal to 5 times negative x. Okay. That's why I do these blank parentheses, and it makes it easy to substitute in that negative x. And now I just try to simplify. What is 5 times negative x? What's the way we normally write that? We write it what? Negative 5x. So f of negative x is equal to negative 5x. Okay. Do these two things match? Yeah, this is not an even function. We know it's not even at this point, but we haven't proven that it's odd. Okay. So now we have to look at so f of x is equal to 5x. How do I find the negative of f of x? What do I do? Yeah, if I put a negative here, I'm multiplying the left side of the equation by negative 1. What must I do on the right? Multiply it by negative 1. Now, does f of negative x and negative f of x, do those things match? Yes. So we know this is what? This is an odd function. Why is it odd? You just copy down. It's odd because those things are equal. Because f of negative x equal minus f of x. Okay? F is it's a function, okay? So it's saying that you substitute values into this function. So f of x equal x squared means you give me an x and you'll square it to get what the function does. Okay, let's look at the next one, and this is more likely what you're going to see. f of x equal x plus 1. Prove that this is neither, I will say prove it's even, odd, or neither. But here I'm telling you it's neither even nor odd. Let's just see how we get there. First step is to write down f of x equal x plus 1. And the reason I write it down here is so you've got this table and you can look and compare the different columns. Okay, so I'll copy this down again. F of x equal x plus 1. I will write it now by doing what? Replacing what? Replacing all the x's with empty parentheses. Okay, so that tells me whatever you want to substitute into f, you have to substitute into these parentheses. So now I know that f of negative x is negative x plus 1. Okay, so this tells me that f of negative x equal negative x plus 1. Do these two things match? Yes or no? No, this is not an even function. Okay, so I know at this point immediately, I know it is not even. Why is it not even? Because what? Right here, f of x, yeah, does not equal f of negative x. So, right, so I now know it's not even. That doesn't mean it's odd. Now I've got to say, let's go figure out if it's odd or not. So, if f of x is equal to x plus 1, okay, how do I find negative f of x? Yeah, if I put a negative in front of this whole side of the equation, I have to do what over here? A negative in front of what? It's the entire side, the entire equation, okay? So if you put a negative on the left side of the equation, it's a negative on the right. So it's the negative of that entire side of the equation, okay? So this is what? Negative f of x is equal to, how do I distribute that? That's what? Negative x minus 1. Now, do these two things match? No. So we know that this is not odd. How do I know it's not odd? Yeah, f of negative x is not equal to minus f of x. Okay? So this is neither even nor. If you didn't say neither, I would take this as an answer. If you can show me it's not even and not odd, I can make the understanding that it's neither. You don't have to say neither. You could say it's neither, and you have to give me both of these reasons. Okay? So you have to give both reasons. If it's neither even nor odd, you have to prove it's not even, it's not odd. And that's how I proved this particular case. Where the first problem. They do equal. In the first problem?
Okay, I guess that negative, but like, I'm just confused. So f of x, whenever, and we have f of negative x, that's even. And
Yeah.
then when we have like f of negative x and negative f of x.
That shows that it's odd.
Okay.
Okay.
Will it always be those two specific?
Well, it's either going to be even or odd or neither.
Well, when it's odd, will it always be f negative x equals negative f?
Yes. So that will always be the case. So that's why you're going to see every problem you see on an assessment is going to have these three columns. And I think that's way on the homework as well. So let's just take a look at what we did. So what we've done so far, if a function is even, f of x and f of negative x are equal. If it's odd, f of negative x equal minus f of x, okay? So if it's neither, you've got to show that neither of these things is true, okay? And the way you find f of negative x is you plug in a negative x everywhere you see an x. The way you find negative f of x is you put a negative on both sides of that equation, okay? So let's look at another one here. And then I'll turn you loose to do a couple. So let's look at this one. F of x equal the absolute value of x plus 2. Okay, that's the easy part. Now, I'm going to write that same thing again, f of x equal absolute value of x plus 2. I'm going to rewrite it. Everywhere I see an x, I'm just going to have a parentheses. If I've got the absolute value, I really don't need to add parentheses. The point is I'm leaving a space for what I need to substitute in. So what do I need to substitute in here? Yeah, a negative x. So I'm going to just change colors. F of negative x equal the absolute value of negative x plus 2. Now, here's where you have to think. So the absolute value of negative x. So this is f of x, negative x, equal the absolute value of negative 1 times x plus 2. So negative x is just negative 1 times x. What's the absolute value of negative 1? It's what? 1. So this tells me that f of negative x is equal to what? It's the absolute value of x plus 2. Okay? So the absolute value of negative 1 times x, that's the absolute value of x times 2. So what do you know now? We know this is an even function. Okay? Do I need to go show it's not odd at this point? Yes or no? If I can prove it's even, I'm done. Okay? So it said prove this is even or odd. I've proved that this is an even function. And it's even because what? Yeah. F of x equal f of negative x. Okay? I'm done. If I can prove it's even, I don't have to go prove it's not odd. Okay? So I proved that it's even. Now, what if it were not even? Then I would have to go do what? I would have to go find, is it odd or not? Okay? That's the way I do that. Questions over this? Okay, so you'll want to spend some time with it. And let's see, I think I've got one or two more, and then I'll turn you loose. Yeah, let's do one more, and then I want to see you guys work on this. Let's determine if this function, x squared minus x, if it's even or odd. So this is everything I've done today, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's been a repeatable process. Write down f of x. Okay. Let's write it down again, and then let's figure out how we substitute into this. So f of x equal x squared minus x. Everywhere I see an x, I'm going to write a blank parentheses, because the next thing I want to do is substitute what into there? Negative x. Oh, sorry, I didn't quite do this. What I said I was doing and what I was doing are two different things. So the blank parentheses. Okay, so all I did, I had blank parentheses. Everywhere there was a blank parentheses, I put in a negative x. And now I got to do some simplification. So this tells me that f of negative x is, okay, what is negative x squared? That's what? Negative x times negative x. Okay, if you need to write that down, that's negative x times negative x. What is the negative of negative x? Plus x, okay? What is negative x times negative x? X squared, because that's negative 1 times negative 1 times x squared. So this is f of negative x equal what? X squared plus x. So is this an even function? No. So I know that this function is not even, okay? Now let's just go figure out if it's odd. Well, you can write neither, and then you can give, I'll do that in a minute. I'll write, if this one's going to turn out to be neither, and I'll write my explanation. So let's come over here. So here, let's write f of x again. Okay, if that's f of x, then how do I find negative f of x? If I put a negative in front of the left side of the equation, I need to put a negative where? On the right side. It negates everything, okay? You can't just put the negative right here and be done. It's not the negative of the first term, it's the negative of that entire side of the equation. So negative f of x is equal to what? negative x squared plus x. Okay. Now, do these two things match? No. So I can just say this is neither. You can write neither, you can write neither even nor odd, but then the explanation why, it's because f of x, right there, does not equal f of negative x, and f of negative x does not equal negative f of x. I know this looks like a lot of writing, but guys, I mean, you're copying off of this chart here, okay? It's not even because these two things don't match. It's not odd because those two things do not match, okay? You guys. So the first one, did you get that one to be even? Yes? Okay. Pardon me? You can. Um, so let's look at this third one here. Are these things identical? No. Okay. So this function is what? Not even. Are these two things identical? No. Okay. So this function is what? Not even. Are these two things identical? 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 Not even. Are these two No. So this function is not odd. You know, if you had trouble seeing it, you could FOIL this. This is x squared plus 4x plus 4. This is x squared minus 4x plus 4. Those are not equal, okay? And this is minus x squared minus 4x minus 4. So you could do that if you want to convince yourself, okay? But you should be able to see that these things are not identical. Yes? This one? Well, because it is not, there's a difference between this. So if you have f of x equal x plus 2 squared, if I put a negative in front of everything, I can't distribute the negative until I take care of the exponent first, okay? So this would be the negative of x squared plus 4x plus 4, then I would distribute the negative, okay? Yeah, so in this case, the answer to this one is neither. So it's neither. And what is your reasoning? Looks complicated, but it's because these two things don't match. F of x not equal to f of negative x, and these two things don't match. F of negative x not equal to minus f of x. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you can either look and say these things. I mean, if you can, I mean, I can look at it and tell you this number right here is different than this number, which is different than this number. So I can look and tell those things do not match. Now, where we did have to work on it, when we had something like this and this, we found out those two things match. Okay. Negative x times negative x gives you x squared. But it's not the same when you have negative x plus 1 squared and x plus 1 squared. Those things, these are not identical, okay? So you can FOIL that to figure it out, or you should be able to get to that by just looking. And I think that is the end of the lesson here. So